Welcome to Executive Access, your home for real talk with industry leaders. I am your host, Jamie Tazi. Today I'm speaking with Nina Somerville, Senior Vice President at Sailpoint, a security technology firm. Nina has an incredible reputation in the tech industry, having held senior positions at Microsoft and Salesforce.com and other places. She talks about the importance of authenticity and transparency in your leadership and how you need to think about them in terms of your long game. She shares her view on leading people and how to get the best out of the teams that you're part of. And she encourages us to think about leadership not as a title, but that leadership is accessible in any role. Nina is a breath of fresh air. It's no surprise to me that she creates such a strong followership with everybody that works with her. Let's dive in. Hi, Nina. Welcome to the Executive Access Podcast. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I was just saying, this has been a long time coming. I really wanted to have you early on the podcast, but your busy travel schedule, you're just like a busy exec traveling around. So, but I'm so excited to have you here today.
Sorry it took so long.
No, this is great. Are you kidding? I thought I knew you pretty well. We've known each other for several years, but as I was prepping and looking at your background, I had no idea that you started off your career as a teacher. Is that right?
I did. Yes. My first gig, as I call it, out of school, I was a high school English teacher for 5 years, which I always say, please don't look at any of the editing of my emails or anything. It's not indicative of that, but it was a blast. I taught 11th and 12th grade English and coached soccer and was a boys varsity soccer coach for any of those old folks that are out there. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's so great. By the way, I thought I used to be a good writer. And I think just years and years and years in corporate writing emails nonstop, I went to write a letter of recommendation for somebody a couple of years ago. And I realized that my writing skills are now terrible. When I actually had to write a proper document versus just like a reply to an email or something, I lost all of those skills. I don't know if that happened to you, but it definitely happened to me.
Totally. There's some bonus in some of the AI tools out there now, because I always say now I'm a good editor. I'm a terrible starter. So something to give me a draft to go on. I can edit pretty well, but yes. And then trying to explain grammar rules or anything cursive to my kids is just a lost cause.
Very good. Yeah, I can relate to that. So how did you transition from education into technology? Because you've been in technology now for many, many years.
Yeah, I was moving locations and decided to leave one school and move to a different town, and truly just luck. I was looking for a teaching job in the next spot back in Northern Virginia. At that time, it was hard to get a job, and I was doing some substitute teaching, and then kind of found my way to a back then startup that was doing training sales, and training felt the most like teaching. But truthfully, I did it just as a little bit of a stop, and was going to completely go back to teaching, and felt guilty for a long time because I felt like I was leaving, such an important job, but sort of meandered my way into a training/sales job in a small company.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah. I mean, I feel like so many people I know who wind up in tech or in sales and tech didn't set out to do that. Like they didn't say, I'm looking for a tech job, but I'm curious, a little later on when I ask you about people and how you develop people, I'm wondering if some of the teacher in you is coming out or some of the love for learning. So, but let's go first about growth mindset. I love to start the conversation by asking, what are you doing personally or professionally to learn and grow these days?
Yeah, it's for me, it's always a point in time. And I started a new job just over 90 days ago. And so a lot of the learning and growing is more about learning new technology, a new company, new people, new process. So I've probably been more guilty of not doing some other reading and things right now because everything's about that. And that's a ton of fun. I think the hard part is letting yourself be in learning mode when you feel like you're supposed to be leading and helping people in a space that you might not know yet.
See, that's the exciting part, because if you came to a new job and you had everything that you needed, for the long term, right? Which first of all, you do. They hired you because you're an amazing leader, which we're going to get into. But is it just the industry and the exact technology that you're in versus what you've done in the past? Is the learning?
What I love is it's really targeted, and so it's about. I always feel like when you've been at a larger company with a massive portfolio, there are deep technical specialists and people who know all the pieces and parts, and so sort of enough to be dangerous. It's a lot of fun being in a very specific identity access security space, which don't ask me too many questions yet about it, but really just learning sort of that depth, and then really realizing how multifaceted that is as well, is just a lot of fun. But it's less about the technology. It's more about getting to know the people, the business, the customers we serve, and how we all, and our competitors too. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, excellent. I wanted to ask you about leadership transitions, because one hallmark of how I see your leadership is that you've done several really great transitions to different organizations, to Microsoft, transition to Microsoft, to Salesforce in a leadership capacity, and now Sailpoint, which is a more growth, not startup, but a growth, smaller organization. What are some of the leadership principles that served you well in the transition? And any advice you would give for the first 90 days to our leaders who are doing the same?
Yeah, I think that the Microsoft to Salesforce in particular made me really go back to some of the leadership training and principles and things that we would take courses on and think we implemented. One in particular, just being sort of the know-it-all who just tells people the answer instead of really helping them and guide them with questions. When you move to a company that you haven't been at, so I'd been at Microsoft 14 years, I do feel like I knew a decent amount of answers. And so I probably was really guilty, instead of helping people find their way, instead just telling them where to go. In switching to Salesforce, where I was really brand new, didn't have a brand, didn't know who to call for all things, like you feel like you do after such a long time. You had to lean back on those things of ask questions, figure out why, direct people in the intent. And that's really hard, because then you're really going, wow, I don't know all the answers. What is my value? And I think that's really important for anyone going. It's lean back on how you do the work, not having all the answers. And so that pushed me a lot, that big change. And I think, for folks as they debate, it's okay to stay somewhere a complete career and stay somewhere 20, 30 years. Absolutely. Jumping somewhere uncomfortable does make you sort of, use those muscles that you haven't as much.
I think that's really good. I was working with a couple clients where this theme of, just being an expert kept coming up, and expertise comes over time. It certainly comes, so not just in your field, but also, like you're saying, being at one company like Microsoft for 14 years, I was there almost 20. The expertise comes just in the way things work, right? And I remember being in my business, and people would come to me and I'd just be like, yeah, hit me with a question that I've never heard before. Like, I've been in this particular business at Microsoft for so long. And what I realized, it was like, what happens over time though, is if you're not careful, while expertise goes up, curiosity goes down, because we're just doing all these matching things in our head. Like, yep, seen that before, didn't work before. Like, I would find myself saying things like, yeah, I hear your idea, but we tried that before, it didn't work. When I should have been saying, like, tell me more about your idea. Like, here's what didn't work last time. How would we do it better? Right. But you're saying, I think, that when you went to Salesforce, you didn't have all of that, company expertise. You had a lot of industry expertise to rely on. So you had to use other skills, questions, curiosity,
100%. And rely on other people more, which I think is really, really important, because we always talk about hiring good people and trusting people and scaling and letting people do their jobs instead of do it for them. That comes out like crazy when you go somewhere new, because you really have to rely on them and then trust. And I think you asked about sort of leadership principles. For me, it's always hard. It's always hard to pick one. It's, what is sort of a key value or a leadership principle you live on. And I think I've come to one for myself, which is just authenticity. And I'd say that's sort of how I live with neighbors and friends and at work. And again, even shifting jobs, I think it's really important. It's like, do they feel like that you are going to do what you say you're going to do, that you are who you are? I always say my favorite people are the people that are the same, whether you see them at work, at home. I always joke, I'm like, I trust you when I feel like how you're talking to me at work is how you'd be talking to your spouse or family sitting on the sofa. And that for me is just, I think it brings out the best in people. And then I think they know how to work with you. And so that combination is important.
I was literally with a group at Microsoft asked me to come back and speak to their rising leaders a few weeks ago. And during Q&A, one person asked about authenticity, right? How, because I think I had shared a similar tenet, and they said, how can you be authentic? How do you do that when there's, the pressures of feeling like you have to be a certain way, or maybe you're earlier in your career and you see the leaders above you and you're trying to sort of act like them. Can you say more? Because you make it sound so easy, but how do leaders show up the same way that they are outside of work when they come to work? Like, how do you really embrace that?
Yeah. No, and I think that there's an appropriateness factor of authenticity, right?
Are you saying you're not appropriate when you're not at work? I don't know. I'm just teasing you.
As I yell at my kids and they're not picking up their laundry, but there is an appropriate, obviously, piece of authenticity. And I also think, and I've had this, I had a leader a while back that said, hey, you might seem too nice and you might smile too much and you might seem like you're having a little too much fun. You should join some call, know an answer that nobody else knows, and then stump everybody on a group call. And I thought, ew, like that is just not how I would operate. What I've realized though is what he described is probably something that takes me longer for people to know, that I might be a little intense, that I might be someone who, of course, is going to fire people if they're not doing good work. I mean, I will get things done. Perception of me first might seem a little casual and might seem a little too nice. I've gotten that quite a bit. But I think it's a long game. That's okay. You be yourself, whomever that is. And over time, they will learn how you operate. You're not going to be able to show off all your great qualities or show how you will operate in a 90-day cycle, year cycle, until you actually are in it. So you have to be yourself during it, or it's not going to be a good outcome. And then you'll get comfortable and change that whole person you were if you tried to put on a front. So I don't have an answer to it. I do struggle with it, and being new again, I'm in that mode again of going, gosh, wonder what they think of me. Wonder what, that it's always, but you've got to just be yourself or you're not doing good work.
I love the long game concept. And I actually remember, I might have said this before, but on another episode, but I actually remember the exact presentation that I gave. It wasn't until I was a GM at Microsoft, so I was pretty far along in my career, when I felt like I was truly myself. I gave this sort of quirky, nerdy presentation. I built my own slides, but they were like terrible and all hacked together. But it was very me. And I remember it so clearly because I remember the response that I got was just people were dialed in. I felt great. The entire thing was really good. And that's how I think you're being yourself, when you can just let everything go. The long game is a good idea as well, just to say, well, over time, because I'm acting consistently, because it's a lot easier to just be yourself than to remember how to be something else or try to be something else. But I also just wonder if pairing that with self-awareness, because what I heard in your answer was also self-awareness. You didn't just say, well, I just am who I am, so, take it or leave it. You said, and I know that in the short term, people might have some judgment about me that looks, in different circumstances, like, really nice or whatever. And that might have some impact to others I'm around, whether it be a customer, my fellow leaders, people on my team. And you know what? I'm okay with that. Or in this particular instance, I might just dial up my authenticity or dial it down a little bit, dial up the edge, dial down the edge a little bit too. Right. So pairing authenticity with self-awareness, I think, enables you to get the outcomes that you're looking for. What do you think about that?
No, I agree. And that is that sort of knowing your audience, knowing when you're in a small, more casual setting, when you're sort of presenting or sharing something to leadership. And I think this is a hard one for people to coach too, because you might have an employee who says, well, I just am who I am. This is just how I act. And it's like, okay, but there's still sort of appropriateness at work. And I think it's a hard one, because if they're not breaking the rules, if they're being themselves, but themselves might be a little too edgy for the setting, it is a hard thing to coach of what's appropriate and what's going to get you to the roles that you want, and sort of how to act. I think that I'm seeing that more and more. And I say I see it with our kids, like they wear their sweatpants and their pajamas to school, and I'm thinking, are you supposed to do that? You shouldn't do that. But I think it is really important. It's the self-awareness of who are you talking to, what is the setting, how are they feeling, and I'll go to the people side. How's the person on the other end of the phone, the other side of the table feeling in the moment, so that you can obviously gauge your level of your tone.
I think that's excellent. Okay. So authenticity, love that for a leadership principle. How does that play out in the first 90 days when you transition into a company? Are there specific things that you are wanting to come in and set the tone around, or is it literally just, showing up, asking questions, being your authentic self?
Yeah, I think coming from really large organizations, and where I am now is about a 2,500 person company, so it's still very large. But being smaller, what I've seen is sometimes we've just done something the way we've done it for a few years, and we need to look and say, how can we scale it? I think the really hard part in scaling, and this kind of, I don't know if it's authenticity, but I'll put it sort of in the trust category, is you have to put people in roles and trust them to do their jobs, trust, verify, check in, but not do it for them, and be able to scale. I think that's the hardest thing to do when you don't know everybody really well. So folks, let's go. And you're to trust people do their jobs and check in, and you're still learning their skills, and you're still learning how they operate, and you're still learning the business of what does success actually look like. But if you go paranoid and you don't trust, then you're in everybody's stuff and you're actually slowing them down. And so I'm in that right now, which is let's have a deal review every day on some opportunity, or let's check in every 3 days on something. Well, I probably am slowing them down because I'm in their stuff that they're managing just fine on their own. And so I think that's that balance that I think is hard at the beginning. But as you grow and scale, you have to hire great people that you trust to do the work, because you absolutely can't be in their business every day.
Yeah. So what you're describing, I think, is, this idea of empowerment. So as a leader, you value being able to trust people to do their jobs and empower them. And then I'm kind of hearing, you didn't use this word, but the word coaching, like you're coaching them to what their skill sets are so that you're helping them get better every single day. And what you're struggling with in the first 90 days or the first time as you transition into a new company is you're learning your team. So you're kind of have to say, go and do that thing. I trust you. But at the same time, I don't know where your edges are. I don't know where I'm going to need to coach you. Right. And so are you,
Yeah, I was saying, and they're probably coaching me more than I'm coaching them right now.
Sure.
Right? They're helping me with where they need help. And that's the partnership part. I think it's so important. And I feel this way. I feel fortunate to be talking to you, and that I'm thought of as a leader that would even be on, this podcast, and being sort of in the leadership role of the team. But I think having people around you, left, right, and below you and above you, that are just better than you. So you're coaching each other, and you bring your different skill sets to help each other be better. So I really don't look at it as a direct hierarchy where I'm doing all the coaching, but I just think it's, hey, as a team, what do we need to accomplish and get done together? And then what groups and skills do we need to make sure we're taking advantage of it?
That's excellent. I love this idea of just everybody has a different role to play. And I used to always say, I'm hiring people around me that are better than me, certainly better at a particular thing than me. And that's where all of my successes come from others as well. I think that's great. Excellent. Yeah. The empowering thing, you definitely have a reputation for that, right? A lot of leaders struggle with empowerment. Where did it come from you that you're able to trust and move on? Or was that something you had to develop as your leadership grew, or is that something that just always came naturally for you?
I don't, I don't know. I think probably it's probably some of the Microsoft time where you're managing folks in a specialist org in particular, where they are deep technical specialists, and I am more the people sales organizational specialist. And so I wasn't going to know as much as they knew. Just by nature of where they've come from in the job. And so it was, how can I help them with sort of the people side and the business side while they deeply know the technology? And then together we marry that. It's probably just by nature of some of the jobs that I took and got along the way sort of forced me to not be the hands-on person. It's probably one of those earlier jobs in state and local in Microsoft where I thought, oh my gosh, these are business intelligence experts who deeply know the product, but maybe, gosh, they're showing up at the customer with the wrong tone. And so how do we elevate their business EQ sense while they stay deep and technical? I think that probably was a more of a good marriage of relationship than I expected. Because I'm sure when I took that job, I thought, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm qualified to take this, technical specialist manager job, but probably roles like that, if I had to guess.
I'm seeing a through line, which is when you push yourself to take on roles that you haven't done before or areas of the business that you haven't done before, it's something that's taking you outside of your comfort zone. It forces you into a new level of leadership, forces you into having to ask questions, trust, see things maybe from a different perspective. And what's coming to mind for me is there's one person I coach, he's amazing, a CEO, and he was promoted from leading one of the business into the CEO role. And of the 5 businesses now he's oversees as CEO, the one that he struggles the most with relationally is the one he came from, right? And as we peel back the onion on that, it's like, yeah, it's because you know it so well. You can look at it and go all the way down 5 layers and you know exactly what's wrong. And so are you in tell it mode too much, as to use your term, versus, learning mode that you are in the other businesses, right? And so I think that's a really good thing. For me, it was also, I was on the sales side of the business and I got my first opportunity to lead a technical team. And I really felt uncomfortable. I even had a little bit of imposter syndrome. I'm like, what? And it was all guys. I'm like, what do these guys think of me? Do they respect me because I'm not technical? And my husband gave me some great advice. He's like, just let them order whatever tech they want and they'll be really happy as a starting point, which is probably bad leadership advice, but it did work. But you know what? What I learned is, I learned a lot. I got more technical. I had to, but they also learned a lot from me, which was around the soft selling skills. It was around how do you look at the business in a different way? How do you contribute? How do you get more integrated as a team, right? So there's really beautiful benefits when you have just different people that come to the table.
Well, and different timing. You mentioned it earlier, which was, we've tried that before. It didn't work. And I think a new face can ask a question of, have we tried this? And to your point, have we tried it in a different way? Or when we tried it 3 years ago, we weren't ready.
That's right.
But now it's something we need to do. And I think as we work with customers, we're seeing that too. We might have seen that a certain role was the main buyer or interested party in a certain solution, but now that's elevated to the CEO or the CIO, where maybe it was a different role. And so we've got to change a little bit of how we approach business, even in security. That doesn't mean just a security technical specialist is the only one that cares. As you can imagine, in this day and age,
Sure.
a CEO, every leader in the company is going to care how we're securing any kind of systems, any kind of cyber conversation is elevated like crazy.
Those are boardroom conversations now.
And so we might have tried something before that now is really important that we address in a different way. You might be talking to an HR leader about the people accessing solutions in a company. And before, we would have really just thought that was a technical buyer. But no, there's now a whole different conversation we have to have. But that's changed in the last 2 or 3 years. So I do think that sort of revisiting topics is hard if you're in it, and really easy to do if you're new.
Yes. Excellent. So,
or just switch jobs. And we're talking new, like you have to switch companies, even just changing roles in an existing company just to stretch yourself.
Absolutely. And that beginner's mindset can bring so much to the table. And then if you've been in a role, you're an expert, there's great value in that, but just making sure you're not getting caught in that trap of not being curious, right? So what is it like? Are there any differences in terms of leading at large companies? So you were at Oracle, Microsoft, Salesforce. You're now at Sailpoint, which is still large, but compared to those big enterprises, not 2,500 people. Are there any differences in how you have to show up as a leader inside either different company cultures or different size organizations? Because we talked about authenticity. So now I'm saying, well, do you have to show up differently in a different culture? So you'll probably say no. I don't know. But are there any differences, any modifications that you need to make either size of the company or culture?
No, I think the real gift is that I can fly to headquarters and hang out for a week and get to know a lot of major stakeholders at the company and start to understand how we work and the history and the evolution. And so I just think that there's beauty in the size of being able to develop those relationships fast. And again, you can do that in any company in your organization, but I think that is really nice. I think spending some time in person, as much as I know it can be hard to be on the road at the beginning, really just getting to know people, how they're motivated, get their energy. It's easy to go to an enablement class online, but when you're sitting in the room with someone and they say, "Oh my gosh, let me tell you where we've come from, what we've done, what we're doing tomorrow," there's a whole different energy of feeling that. So I encourage folks, obviously, if you financially with T&E and things is to just get to know some people in a business setting, obviously. But I think those times are invaluable because I do feel like I've already got a sense of a lot of people and the work we do. But no, I don't think any different. I don't think any different. And maybe that's age. I'll just admit that maybe that's age. It's sort of like I am who I am. Let's see how we can do good work together. You get to know people faster, and you get to know how you all complement each other faster by being yourself. But I am sure if you'd asked me the same question 5 or 10 years ago, I probably would have had a different answer.
No, I think it's a perfect answer. And by the way, I see the book, The First 90 Days, on your bookshelf behind you. It's one of my favorites. It's one of my go-tos around transition. So I might reference that in the show notes. I had this one major transition during my time at Microsoft. I was offered a position that probably should have been based in Seattle, but I lived in Charleston, and I was allowed to do the job from Charleston. And I made the decision to fly out every week for 3 days for the first 6 or 7 weeks. And I had 3 young kids at the time. I told my husband, it was a decision we made together. I'm like, I really feel like I need to do this to get off on the right foot. This is what that's going to look like for our family for, 7 weeks or something. And we all agreed, but that was invaluable because then when I started to scale it back, then it was like I would go out every other week. And then sometimes maybe just once a month. All the relationships were there. The video working was just fine. But I'm pretty convinced that if I hadn't done that upfront relationship build, in person being the best way, it would have just been a little bit more difficult and taking a lot more time. So I think that's great advice.
I agree. Just even sitting in a room on a whiteboard, I think in my early days at Oracle, sitting in cubes, dialing with our headsets on, and you'd hear somebody say something, and you'd lean and go, "What did you just say? Did that work?" And we've lost a decent amount of that, and that doesn't mean you can't set aside time remotely. But I do agree, and same thing here. The kids are, 2 10th graders and an 8th grader, and it can be hard to be on the road, but a choice we made, and the reality is they're probably just fine and don't notice that I'm gone half the time at this age.
Oh, they notice. They just won't admit it. I think that's
exactly.
They act like they don't care, but they do. Let's talk about building other leaders, right? Because you definitely have a reputation for growing strong leaders behind you. And I think I'm starting to hear some threads about why that is so, wanting to get to know people and empowering people. But building leaders, is that something that you do intentionally, or is that just an outpouring of just this authenticity showing up at work?
I do think it's really just understanding who people are, and then helping them highlight those good traits. I do. We were talking about the in-person part. I think virtually people can have a perception or misperception of someone when they just show up on one call, or all a leader's going to hear is about, it is third-hand information about somebody. So I think it's our job as leaders to know deeply what our people are good at, maybe what they're weaknesses or opportunities for improvement are, and then really help them highlight that. You've got to be their advocate. And this is probably more larger company space, but as you advocate for people and share and get them where they want to be as well. So I can think of a few people, it's just that, they might have a brand or a misperception, and it's on you to say, this is what they do really well. This is this is the job they want to be in next. And then helping highlight and then setting them up for showing that off. So we always tell people lead in any role, but it can be really easy not to have the opportunity to show up on a review or, a business review or an internal meeting or a customer meeting. So we've got to give people the opportunity to shine as well, which sometimes means stepping away. And I struggled with that a bunch younger, which was, I still even remember, actually I had my twins first. And I had a certain boss at the time you might know pretty well. And I stayed online. They were in the NICU for a month. I worked during that month because I thought, well, I can work and the team needs me. And I still did all the things. I had another child within like 20 months. And one of the same employees worked for me at the time. And she said, you didn't really let us run the team while you were gone. And we can. And can you step away and let us do that? And it was a really good lesson that, one, my job's still going to be there when I come back. If you are sick, if you are on leave, if you are taking a vacation, you shine by letting others step up and take over. You don't actually look like you're not necessary. And I think that was something earlier. It was like, wow, if I'm not there, they're going to realize they don't need me. And it's no, I should be able to disappear and the place runs like clockwork without me. And that means I've got people in the right leadership mode. So I think just little lessons over time of just, one, how do they shine, giving them opportunities to shine, stepping away so that they can doesn't diminish your importance, if you will. And it's little bits of all those together.
Wow. I really love that. So, I think that comes sometimes from a little bit of fear. Like if I'm not there, will they forget about me or realize, like you say, I'm not important? It comes also from a sense of accountability. Really strong leaders are really impactful people who are used to going 110%, doing the job, and sometimes letting go feels like I'm putting my stuff on you, right? When it's actually flipping the script on that and you saying, let's empower our team, let's give them an opportunity to shine. But, the nugget in there too that I noticed is you had somebody on your team that came to you and said, hey, get out of the way. I mean, she said it nicer than that. She said, hey, you didn't give us an opportunity. Will you give us an opportunity? But essentially she was saying, will you please stop and let us. I don't think that everybody who might be thinking that would actually tell their boss that. So what do you think about the way you lead enabled her to feel comfortable enough to come and tell you, hey, let us move over and let us shine a little bit?
Yeah, I can think of the person. We probably had a pretty tight group where we knew each other well, and one of those rare occasions where no one changed roles for 3-4 years. So they were probably pretty comfortable. I do create open space for, I often create open space for, please let me know if something isn't working for you. Not everyone's going to, and that's totally okay. But hopefully I've at least set the space for people to give feedback or let me know what they need.
Excellent. So one of the things that I think a lot about is how, as leaders, do we make sure we're creating those open spaces, right? So that people will tell you the things that you need to hear versus talking to each other about them or just letting them sit, because that's where discomfort and, morale issues come in. And one of the things I think in particular in more of an online culture where it's sometimes hard to interpret, all the right body language versus being in person. I think leaders that go deliberately try to spend time explaining the reasons why they're doing things. So I think back earlier in our conversation, you were saying that during this period of time in your first 90 days when you're learning people and you're learning the business, you might be digging in more on the business that feels like in people's business more than you would want to or they would want to. That's a great example of a time where you would just say, hey, listen, I recognize that I'm being a little more hands-on in the business than I'd like to be. Here's why I'm doing it. I need to get up to speed. I want to get to know you a little bit better. We're learning how to work together. my intention would be not to be like this in a little bit, but here's why it's a benefit now. I just find like when you tell people the why about how they're experiencing you, especially as you're getting to know people, it takes all of the drama away, because if you don't explain the why, people will fill in the gap of the why themselves.
Oh, yeah.
They will come up with their own stories that are generally not favorable to you or to others, because people like stress out, right? So I think telling them and spending the time as a leader to be very clear on why you're doing things. Also recognizing that most people won't ask you if they have a concern. Most people won't feel comfortable enough. They'll just sort of smile and take it. What do you think about that?
No, I think it applies to everything. I think it's, in thinking about this conversation, I thought of what's one of those pitfalls. And I think transparency, we overuse the word transparency, and it's, being transparent for what people need to know. You can't tell everybody everything, but what you can share, can you share it, and can you share the intent behind it, I think is really important. So one, it might be something of something I'm doing. Like, let me explain why I'm asking this question. In sales world, I'm often explaining, here is what number I have called. Here is what I have promised to the business. Here's why I'm pushing on X, Y, or Z. We might also, as we flip a fiscal year, there might be some go-to-market planning, and we might make some changes, right? And this is every year, every company. And if you can explain to people why that changes, or why a role changes, or why, some team changes, or what's coming a little bit ahead of time, it makes a world of difference of people not feeling like it's happening to them, but they're part of it. I also think it gives people confidence that you're going to share when you need to share, and that they know that there's comfort, and then the rumor mill stops. So I had a lovely boss and friend, Noah Sandage, who so I'll just call her out on here.
I love Noah.
She used to end a lot of calls a long time ago. This is back at Oracle, and she'd say, rumors, gossip, anything like that. Was how she would sort of end calls, just to leave open space. And always somebody would say, I heard that they're about to cut some team, or I heard, and you could just address it with the group and say, okay, here's what I know, here's what I don't know, or here's what I just actually can't tell you. But I think just opening space for that, it is so easy. I'm sure in any job, I'll use sales, it's so easy to make every call a forecast call. Every interaction a deal update. I'm guilty. Anyone listening right now who works for me, super guilty. Of just, you get on the phone, they're like, okay, what did that customer call back? Does that customer need anything? When really that one-on-one time should have been about that person. And so I think we have to just really carve out space, that you have career specific or personal specific one-on-one time, and you have, calls for set things like forecast, like business planning, and use them that way. And to your point, in a virtual world, the social will stop. You'll get right to business and say, great, we have 10 extra minutes, let's move on to the next thing. The social happens a little bit more in person, or you have to carve out that space. But I think it is really important, to just contain yourself from just running at a business speed, and making everything about that.
That's great. That's great. I do think when I get busy, I would I'd be guilty of maybe not explaining the why. I would just be like, we need to do this, 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 and this. And I never got the right results, because I found when I took the extra moments just to explain what was in my head and what I was trying to accomplish, 9 times out of 10, the team, when they understood that, would say something like, well, we can do it this way, Jamie, but I have a better idea to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. And I'm like, yeah, that's even better than what they wind up surprising you with even better ways of doing things, which is all about the empowering, kind of brings us right back full circle.
And I think we have to, I think we have to remember which people and which roles might care about the company's success, and which folks really just care about themselves. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You might be in a role and your goal is some sort of income to support your family. Do you have to care about the company bottom line or the company vision? And there's a blend there somewhere, but in each role, you're going to care more about that or less about that. And it's okay. You do need to buy into the company culture and the solutions and products and how you serve customers. but it's okay to not care. How is Nina's org performing? No, if every, I always say in any business, if every individual meets their accountabilities and goals, the company will succeed, the division will succeed, the group will succeed. And so I think we have to start there first at each individual meeting their expectations and goals, because then the outcome will be everybody succeeding. I think when we do all hands calls, or when we talk about messaging, we talk about some big win, or we talk about an end result, or we talk about an earnings call at a larger company, and does everyone really care? So it's like, no, let's think about every individual's accountabilities. They will add up to the success.
Excellent. Yeah. I guess I'm a little bit of a Pollyanna. I like to think that you can like motivate people with like one common set of goal. We're going to Camelot in our business. And I think generally most people like to be part of something bigger than themselves. But I love what you're adding to that, which is at the end of the day, so what? Who cares for everything that you're trying to communicate and do for each member of your team, and recognizing that it might be different for each person. You started this conversation saying, hey, it's at a point in time where I am right now in my career, or where I am right now in just life in general. So I think that's a good balance.
Well, and hopefully it's both, right?
Yeah,
Hopefully
of course.
It's always both.
Of course.
But I think understanding where people are and then messaging it that way, and where I work now, our leadership are people of great value, who anyone you ask on our team, these are people that they'd follow anywhere, a CEO that they'd want to work for no matter what he did. And so there is a bigger purpose in how people talk, but I think also but are they doing okay month to month themselves? Also has to be both.
I think that's great. So starting to move towards a close here, any other career advice? So this podcast, we have early in career listeners who are, aspiring leaders. We have very senior leaders. And I've definitely found through my coaching practice, like the more senior you go, like the lonelier it gets sometimes, right? Any career advice that you can think of for either any of those stages of your career, or anything you want to share before you wrap?
Yeah, I think for people, it's just lead no matter what role you're in. Yeah. And I know we say this, but I think the people who shine and the people who get the next job that they want, that doesn't have to be management and leadership, just experiences that they want, are the people who lead in their day job, not wait for some title to do it. And I think that's the most important. Do you step up and try and lead, whether people report to you or not? I had a conversation just the other day. It said, if I get this job, then people will listen, kind of tone. And they didn't use those words. It's like, no, you can lead in any role. And I think it's hard, because I think we all have a very busy day job. And I remember we used to always assign, our shining stars, the special projects. And it's like, oh my gosh, we're giving them extra work to do. But I think that's on you, no matter what role you're sitting in. What are those extra things that you want to try and do and show off in a positive way, that show you as a leader in your day job, not waiting until you get into a specific job? I think that's super important. And I see it every day as to who seems to sort of be the most successful.
If you were to break that down, like what are the components of leading in any role? Is it taking ownership in a different way, or like what are the qualities? Like when you see it, what are people doing?
Yeah, I think it's not pointing at different groups and saying, I'm not getting X. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm not getting Y. This isn't working. This is broken. That's sort of the not productive side. It's when that person says, I'm going to gather our groups from across the company and see if we can come up with a better way. Collectively do that work and then share it with everybody. I think the sharing is the most important. That if you do the first part without the sharing, then it's really personally opportunistic. You do the sharing, then you're truly leading across the business.
Okay, so bringing people together to solve problems and sharing success with others.
Mm-hmm. You say it better every time, Jamie.
No, I'm just like breaking it down. You come up with all the brilliant ideas. That is what someone told me once. They're like, you're like BASF, that chemical company. They used to put commercials on. They're like, at BASF, we don't make the toys you use. We make them stronger. Like that's me. I don't have any original ideas. I can just like Anyway, great. Besides the first 90 days, any books or frameworks that have been really useful for you?
Well, like I said, I was in the learn my new place mode. So yes, you like the book, I put it out for us, right? I did sort of reopen the first 90 days book. I think it's a great one. It's just reset the things that you know to be true and how you think about showing up. Also, our CEO wrote a book, and so it was one, they mailed it to me, of course, before I started, which was lovely. Joy and Success at Work, by Mark McLean. And I thought, one, love the title, so I wanted to read it. Two, get to know your new boss is probably a really good move, and how he thinks. But I definitely, it's more of a point in time. So that's a perfect example of, for this purpose, that was the right thing to sort of read and get to understand the culture and the business. And it's been great. And I think I love the Joy and Success at Work. We all should have a good time. We spend more time at work than we spend at home. And so if you are not having a good time, kind of goes back to be yourself, because you're not going to have fun if you're trying to put on a front that's not yourself. And then bring others along. I had a wonderful HR partner a long time ago, and I was trying to figure somebody out. Like, I didn't understand what they were mad about, or I didn't understand, there was some situation that they were frustrated, and I was trying to understand. And he said, "Stop it." He said, "You cannot understand where everybody's coming from. It's not your job. Your job is to listen, empathize, and then help them with the path forward." And I love that, because when I get stuck in trying to make things perfect, or when I get stuck where I just don't sort of get somebody, it comes back all the time. He said, if you commiserate, you perpetuate the problem. If you try too hard to understand, everyone comes from a different place. It's not about that you're not empathetic, but your job is, how do we move forward? And so it sticks with me all the time as we solve problems together.
I love that. Great. Well, I ask every guest one final question. By the way, this is like really gnawing at me. I've been noticing just some of the like unconscious biases I have, and then like make them conscious. And I have to admit, when you told me that your CEO and founder wrote a book, it popped up in my head. I was like, what is this, like Security Fundamentals 101 or something like that? Some technical book. And then you said Joy and Success at Work. And I'm like, I have to pick up that book. So you go, Mark. I'm excited to read your book. So sorry, I had to confess that bias that popped in my head. And I'm noticing that more and more. All right. So for you, though, a final question. If you could wrap by just giving one piece of advice about leadership, what would that be? Did I steal that question already about leading where you are?
The sort of lead in every role. Hire fast.
Ooh.
Fire fast. You know when you know. And when I say fire, I don't mean that means someone leaves a company. But make decisions faster and move. And I'm probably giving myself that advice too. It's hard to, because you want to get it exactly right. And do it with people. People usually know when they're uncomfortable, and they know when they're not in the right spot. And so I think getting people to the right place for their skill set as fast as you can, and then making calls fast, obviously with the right due diligence. You have happier, healthier crowd around you.
Okay. I agree with that. If I think of the top 5 mistakes that I've made in my career from a leadership perspective, at least 3 of them would be not doing that advice well. So thanks for that, Nina. Well, I appreciate you so much. I think Sailpoint is so fortunate to have you. I wish you and Sailpoint all kinds of success in the future. And thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me. Good to see you.
You too. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Join us every Tuesday for insider access to executive leadership.